Take advantage of the fact that your students are at home and ask them to close all the lights. Then ask them to dance in the dark like no one's watching.
Turning point for me was actually stepping away from 5, 6, 7, 8 perfect choreographed routines and actually moving into more of phrase work.
Get creative and detailed with your verbal explanations of the movements. It can be hard sometimes for the student to really see what you're doing down to the intricacies in each movement. So practice how you're going to explain the move to the student and make it fun while doing it.
Splitting the larger class into groups and having them watch each other do something that they've learned and cheer each other on can be such a great way of making connections in this time when we need it most.
Using the camera to your advantage. I ask my students to think about intention and who the camera is. Are they an audience member? Are they a full row? Are they a lover? Are they something more private?
Make sure you're checking the chat. It's easy, especially in a movement class, to ignore the chat, but so many valuable comments and questions happen in the chat.
We can't always expect our students to be able to frame their full body in the camera. So plan a lesson where you don't need to see their whole body in order to help them get the movement. Make sure you leave room for them to ask the questions that they need and check in to see if they're getting those moves down right. Since you can't provide tools for the class in the space where you would normally teach, make sure you let them know well ahead of time what they need for the class.
Ask your students to touch themselves in places they wouldn't touch themselves in public.
I am dancing and residing on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, which includes the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations, which we commonly know as Vancouver, British Columbia. Everybody was saying the same thing, right? I have no room to move at home, no room to dance at home. So by moving through and actually saying to students, hey, let's use our spaces in our favor. Let's include the wall into our exercises. Let's use our couches in our exercises. Let's make that an extension of our movement. Let's make that a prop that plays into it. You bump into it, that's cool. Why don't we fold into it and find some new movement that comes out of it? Turning point for me was actually stepping away from 5, 6, 7, 8 perfect choreographed routines and actually moving into more of phrase work. And also invite students that if the audio wasn't working online for whatever reason, or your Wi-Fi is being weird, to mute me, turn off your camera, whatever feels good, and even use their own music to complete through these dance phrases. And I think at a time where we don't have a lot of control over things, putting the control in our students' hands to move the way they want to move within a little bit of a structure so they're still achieving whatever the goal is of the class has been a really wonderful learning tool. I actually decided to step away from those highly choreographed dances online because there are some people who are doing it so well. I chose to make those kinds of videos as a recording that people could buy or access later. You can allow students to go back as many times as they want. They can rework a section, and we spend less time troubleshooting IT on the internet and more time actually dancing. At the end of the day, our students just want to dance. That's the connection. That's what we're seeking to continue with each other, especially during these times.
Here are some tips and tricks we've learned teaching online at Rouge Studio of Dance. Create a moment at the beginning and end of class where you can be in gallery view and connect with your students by having a little chat. Give options. It can be intimidating for a student to ask for adaptations to a move due to physical limitations, so have something in your back pocket if you know a move is particularly challenging for a certain body part. Present it in the moment in the class, regardless if you know if the student needs it or not. That way, they don't need to put themselves in an uncomfortable situation to have to ask it in front of the class. Of course, being on camera is encouraged, and we love to see everybody's beautiful faces and moves that they're doing at home. However, for me personally, I like to give students the option of cameras on or off for part or the entirety of the class. If someone wants to dance at home in their underwear and they're not comfortable doing that in front of everybody on the virtual class, if they're going to feel more confident doing it with their camera off, go for it. Keep it light. We're here to have fun. Yes, we want to improve and we want to challenge ourselves, but overall, the goal is to have fun, and that's what we want to accomplish in these classes.
My first tip for teaching online is to make sure you're checking the chat. It's easy, especially in a movement class, to ignore the chat, but so many valuable comments and questions happen in the chat. My second tip for teaching online is to go a little more slowly than you would go if you were in person. When you're in person, it's easy to see somebody who's struggling or perhaps not picking up something as quickly, but it's a little bit harder online. So go a little bit more slow and ask lots of questions to make sure that your content is being understood.
My name's Nancy, otherwise known as Susie Vavoom, and these are my tips for teaching burlesque online. It's important in these pandemic times to remember that we're feeling very disembodied. So I ask my students to really be present in how they touch their own body. I ask them to feel the sensation of their own skin and the own hair on their arm, the sensation of their hands and the weight of their hands on their body, starting from a place of focusing on themselves before we turn it into something a little more performative. Another tip for teaching burlesque online is asking your students to reflect on something they really like about themselves that's a physical trait, and then using that as a tool in designing choreography or creating acts to draw attention or focus to that thing. So for example, I really love my shoulders, and I try to draw attention to them by both the way that I sit and stand in performance and also how I use my body to indicate how I feel about that particular body part. Another tip for teaching burlesque online is using the camera to your advantage. I ask my students to think about intention and who the camera is. Are they an audience member? Are they a full row? Are they a lover? Are they something more private? And then I ask them to set an intention when looking at the camera. So are you being commanding, seductive, coy? And thinking about what movement, aesthetics, and different traits would then tell that story. Using the camera also as a character and the ways that you treat it is another way to create different types of responses and feeling in your audience. For example, if you're being more commanding, you then might want to treat the camera a little differently.
Stay safe, and hopefully we'll all get to dance together soon.